Welcome back to another episode of the Engineering Future Podcast. I'm your only host, Louis Duque. I have Nicolai here with me again. And how you doing, Nicolai? How's your week going? It's been a little while since we chatted.
Oh man, things are going good. I spent the weekend tearing down my horse barn, so that I'll be feeling that for a few more days. But I'm excited to be on another episode and talk about different types of career progressions today.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the things that as a young professional, as a young engineer, when I first graduated from school, I thought, hey, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to do calculations basically until I retire. Maybe potentially work on some like maybe project management, but that seemed like there was a different area, like not really engineers were doing project management. And that's just kind of my preconceived notion of what it looked like. So I wanted just kind of a fresh lens. 6, 7 years out of school now, just some of the things that I want to do with my career as of right now. I know you obviously just manage people, have a little bit of like project management as well. I just want to talk about some of the career paths that you have maybe seen, and I think we can just start with maybe with a few of examples. And I think for the sake of time and everything, we'll just dive into a couple. But what are some of the career paths that you've seen in civil engineering, structural engineering, like just in engineering in general?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious is the technical side. That's I think that's the one where we all graduate from college, and that's just the natural progression we think it's always going to take. And some people think that's the only path that you can take, and clearly that is not the case. There's lots of many different things, but technical obviously is the biggest one. Project management is another one. I know a lot of engineers that end up going into sales.
Mm-hmm.
One of my best friends in the industry, he works actually with us here, and he was great, and he was a great project manager as well. But then he just kind of found his niche in being, business development, and he is one of the best that I know of. Then you have, operations. That's a whole other side of things, and some companies maybe aren't big enough to have kind of a big distinction between managers and operations, or project managers and operations, but operations makes the business go. We worry about the people side of things, we worry about the financial side of the business. Maybe you have kind of like a business unit within your region, that you focus on, and maybe with 50 to 800 employees, or however your company is split up. So those are a few of the higher level ones. I personally am kind of more on the operations track. So I'm a people leader here at Jacobs, and I've enjoyed this job for the last 2.5 years. It's been great, but my KPIs, if you want to call them that, are going to be different than the project managers. Now I can serve as a project manager, and I do project manage some projects, but that's kind of my path. But I think you are kind of gravitating towards the project manager side, or where do you feel like you're gravitating already?
And I think that's kind of one of the things that as I was kind of entering the profession, was like, I really like engineering. I would always want to be doing some sort of like just engineering calculations and whatnot. But as I started kind of get into just the career, and I think just the aspect of project management, I think it's just interesting because you have the ability to talk with clients, you're working with your team, you're pursuing projects that may be a little more interesting to you, and you are maybe more involved in that process. And that just, I don't know, I wouldn't say that was my dream when I graduated from school 7 years ago, but right now it seems like just a very fun thing to do. I mean, engineering is fun. I still like the engineering part of it. But when you're kind of talking with clients and like actually being in the thick of the project, make sure everything is going well, that just seems like a more exciting thing for me as I kind of look into where I want to be in a few years in my career. So again, it's not something I was thinking about when I was graduating from school. I just kind of was focused on engineering. Obviously, I need to make sure my technical skills are strong, make sure my people skills, my communication, all these other things are strong if I want to succeed in a role as a project manager whenever that happens. But knowing the career options, I think that's kind of the most important thing, and something that I wanted to discuss here in this episode, because we as engineers think just engineering, we're just going to do calculations, focus on the technical stuff. But I mean, you could go out and be a professor. You can go out and work for the government. You can go out and start your own business if you wanted. There's so many different ways that you can use your skills in engineering to do other things. And maybe you're passionate about, uh, again, like, I don't know, podcasting, for example, and you want to talk about all the technical stuff, and that's kind of what you're passionate about. And maybe you stay up to date in the research, and you go to conference, and you still doing a lot of engineering, but your main profession could be podcasting. Your main profession could be content creation around engineering. So there's like so many different ways that you can use your engineering skills to really leverage some of those other maybe skills that you have and can use.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the possibilities I think really are endless. You can find ways to do it. When I was graduating from college, I had project manager on my mind. That
Mhm.
was something that was a big goal for me. And within the first year, my supervisor was educating me on his definition of a project manager. And his definition was somebody who can go out, meet with the clients, and actually win work with their name on the resume as the project manager.
Mhm.
And that was a big eye opener for me because I realized, oh, it takes years and years to do that. Could you do it in 6, 7 years? Maybe, some people can for sure. But for the majority of engineers that I see and mentored and work with, many of them, you don't really put your head down. I don't recommend that ever. Like, don't ever just put your head down, but you kind of have your head more down and you just focus on that technical stuff those early years, just be a sponge. And then at some point, honestly, in that 5 to 8 year range is when I see a lot of people start to kind of pick their head up a little more and start to see, oh, okay, where do I go from here? Hopefully you've had your head up a little bit and you kind of been watching and observing some of those folks that you think, oh, maybe I want operations or sales or project management. But that 6 to 8 year range really is when a lot of people start to think about it a lot. Then in that kind of, and I'm just using general numbers, by the way. The numbers, the years could be varied from person to person, but that like 7 to 11 or 8 to 12 year range, those are the worst years of your career, man. Everybody I see, it is the hardest because that's where you're actually making a transition, but you're still holding on to certain things, and then you're also being delegated to, but then you also delegate, and it's just really, really rough. We should do a whole episode on that maybe one of these days. But that's where you're starting to maybe pivot to that direction that you kind of chose. Um, Project managers, I love that. And then there's a story here in Phoenix that one of the gentlemen I work with, he was in operations and he was leading hundreds and hundreds of people, and he was good at it from what I hear. This was before I was here, but uh, he realized his passion really was for project management because he got more fulfillment and he felt like his skills were better suited for serving the client.
Um,
I love, and my passion is for serving the people who serve the clients. That's kind of like where I am. And that took me years to kind of figure that out too. But he just loves serving client and like finding solutions for them, or they have a problem and he doesn't know how to fix it, but he's resourceful and finds people who can do it. Like, it just lights him up. And so he pivoted, and this was later in his career. He pivoted to that project manager and kind of got out of the operations. So you can pivot anytime you want, but I think the important thing is trying to figure out that one thing that you like most early on. And then you start to go there, and then you have a little bit more runway to get there, and then you just start developing those skills. And so let's say you're a project manager, you're serving clients, and then your main focus is scope, schedule, budget, right? If we were to simplify it all, scope, schedule, budget. Try to talk to some of the project managers, even when you're younger. So for you, Luis, when you're putting together a scope and fee, or your supervisor is, ask them to be part of it. Ask them to sit down and you just watch them for 30 minutes. I just did that with an employee of mine last 2 weeks ago, and they didn't really contribute a lot, but I asked them questions. Hey, how long do you think this would take you? And then I would say, well, this is how long we have to do it. And it was fun, but getting that exposure when it's not your full responsibility, that is the best way to learn. I mean, I don't, I'm know that you are very proactive in your, development, professional development, but That is the best way to learn, is to just get exposure without the responsibility. Have you thought of those? Like what sort of thoughts did you have of things that you wanted to take a step on?
Yeah, and I think that's what you were just saying there. I think it's exactly what it just resonate with everything. It just as you are entering the career, I think it's great to look at different options. Like you don't know what you're gonna like until you actually start getting into it. You could say, I'm really gonna like just being an engineer and working in engineering projects my whole career. But once you get into that, like, this is not kind of what I expected. It's kind of boring. I don't want to be looking at spreadsheets all day and just kind of get a task and just work through it. Maybe I do want to work a little bit with other people in the company, maybe with clients, and maybe you pivot that way. Same happens when you are maybe looking into more the people management or the client management in terms of like project management or just a people leader within your company. You start seeing the things that you like and you don't like. But if you don't try them, I think that's going to be really hard to like narrow those down. And I think we touched a little bit on this on a different kind of topic when we were talking about internship. It's great to try different areas of engineering. It's the same way. It's great to try different career paths and talk to people and kind of maybe get a little educated on some of the ones that you're not as familiar with. But like you said, just asking the questions, making sure you're getting involved in those areas is super, super important. Not only for just making sure you are one, have these skills that you need to develop to get to the positions, but as well as just the interest to manage and kind of grow into that position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it totally makes sense. The technical skills, and I know that everybody says this, but I don't think we can say it enough, is the technical skills are so important. And that is a challenge for me because I'm working on projects that are types of projects that I really have not worked on before.
Mm-hmm.
And so to manage those projects can be challenging, and I don't need to know everything as a project manager, but it sure helps. I don't have to be an expert on everything, but it sure does help to at least be able to speak the language, know what your engineers need, be able to translate, what your engineers are telling you to the clients in terms that are easy to understand, or, help them develop exhibits and all of that stuff. But technical skills are so important. And then again, if you're doing final design, which there's also changes in that. Like you could do studies, you could do final design there, you can do design builds, all different types of project styles, right? And it's hard to be an expert in all of them. But if you're doing final design, knowing the cost estimates, knowing the specs, I was just putting a spec package last week, and it was rough. Like, reading every single page, couple hundred pages in this spec package, and having to rely on the engineers really to help me finish it all. Uh, I just want more experience in that, so I can be a little bit more knowledgeable, but luckily we just have really amazing people that we work with that can do that. So again, I don't think a project manager needs to be an expert on everything, but boy, it sure does help to be pretty strong on everything.
Yeah, and I think as you were talking about that, I don't know if you heard or have read the book Range. It's a great book because in a world, especially in engineering, I think we talk a lot about like you need to be an expert in bridges if you want to work on bridges. You need to be an expert in buildings if you want to be work in buildings. You gotta be the expert if you want to do great in engineering. But at the same time, if you want to be a project manager, or even if you want to be a great engineer, if you don't know the skills or the different areas of your career, like let's say you work in residential construction or in commercial construction, if you don't know a little bit about like plumbing, electrical, all of these other fields that interfere with your work, you're gonna struggle to kind of get through those projects and make sure they're successful. You're gonna be struggling in meetings where you are talking with these other fields of engineering or like or just talking about the construction aspect of this. So making sure you have a well diverse knowledge base, I think, is super important. And every time I kind of get into some of these projects, and one of the ones that come to mind right now is we're doing some culverts out in Boulder. I don't have a ton of experience of like hydraulics or things like that, but I know kind of just the basics that I can understand that If you have water flowing through a culvert, you're going to have some sort of pressure that is going to be applied to the structure that I need to be accounted for. Maybe you have a different type of structure. Like, what are some of the loads they need to be accounted for? You go to those meetings knowing a little more than just, hey, I'm going to design this as a beam. I'm going to be thinking about this. You can communicate with those other fields of engineering a little easier. So I think it's great to be an expert in a lot of things, and I think I like the like T-shape knowledge example. Like you have to be like a lot of breadth in terms of like civil engineering, but you also need to dive deeper into some of these areas if you want to become an expert. So like for me, just like bridge design, I want to become an expert in bridge design. I need to like dive deeper into the code and just like the requirements and whatnot, but I still need to have that the top of the T where there's a lot of general knowledge that needs to happen for me to be able to communicate with clients, with contractors, knowing how bridges are built and designed and how does it come together. I think that's an aspect that doesn't get talked to a lot, especially in engineering when we want to be experts and you're trying to pursue master's degree, PhDs, doing research in specific things, but we kind of forget about the rest of the field and kind of how our kind of niche fits into the bigger picture of like a project in general.
Yeah. Oh man. So I mean, we need experts in certain fields that just focus on that. You know, we absolutely need those people who don't have maybe the wider range, because those are very, very key people on projects. You know, I have a roadway engineer who is extremely technical, never wants to supervise anybody and never wants to manage a project, but he can design anything. You know, year and a half ago, I had the pleasure of working on a project where we literally have a couple, but the one I worked with, this guy flies all over the world and he comes in and he's an idea person, just big ideas. Have you thought of this? So we're trying to, you know, come up with this concept, and he comes in and shares his ideas, and we ended up going with one of them, and we won the project. You know, it was just like, how cool to be such an expert in his field. He probably doesn't supervise people. He probably doesn't, you know, manage projects, but he knows what you can do geometrically, how the drainage will be impacted, how his geometrics may impact structure sizes, which helps with the cost of the project. You know, he just knew it all, and he was solid, right? I just thought that was so cool
Yeah.
to be able to have that. But again, if you're looking at project management, it would be great to be an expert in something, but you do need to have that wider range of drainage. You know, you don't need to be able to design the drainage, but if something looks odd, you need to be able to at least say, oh, that doesn't look right. Have you thought of this? Or did you do your spread calculations? Or did you do whatever this is? Or did you look at how this impacts this down the road, you know, quarter mile or something like that? So, I mean, there's so many different things that you really do need to kind of know when you're a project manager, or will help you so much. Um, so those early years specializing in your field, and then eventually just trying to be a sponge in meetings, and maybe after the meeting ask the environmental person, why do you need this? You know, just ask, be curious. That's really going to help you out, I think, in on your path to a project manager, if
Yeah.
that's the way you went.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting. Let's close this with just kind of summarizing maybe some of the things that engineers or young professionals can do to just maximize their I wouldn't say like knowledge gathering or just kind of maybe some of these skills that can help them achieve these dreams. And obviously, it's going to depend on what you want to do. The size of the company, I think, has a big role. I think we touched on that early in the year. But in your opinion, kind of what are some of the maybe general skills or just general advice that you will give someone just graduating from school, they're starting their career, as they progress, what are some of the skills they should develop within their first maybe 5, 7 years and beyond to give them the best chance of like just accommodating to, let's say, a project management or a government position or a teaching position? Like, I think there's a base of skills that you can develop to get there, and then you start kind of getting more specialized depending on where you want to go.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about project management specifically, or maybe a lead in a government agency, uh, I mean, some of the skills really are the basics of that: organization, communication, uh, figuring out how to manage your time and organizing schedules so that you're not scrambling after every project, at every submittal. And we all know submittal deadlines, those 2 to 3 weeks approaching those are hectic for everybody, but they don't always have to be hectic for everybody, right? And so with a good project manager who helps to plan ahead and see how different puzzle pieces are working together, not just their projects even, maybe it's a competing project managers who's using resources, but just knowing that, being able to zoom out and kind of see how all these pieces fall into place, that's a skill. So many of us are like you, just so narrowly focused on what we're doing. So that was a skill. The communication is a skill. um it's kind of a hard thing to say, but just something that kind of popped into mind. But being humble enough to be curious, I would say I was pretty shy when I was younger, but I was pretty confident in, like, this is what I want. And could have been very easy for me to just let my pride be like, well, I don't need your help because I can just do this myself. You know, I mean, there are some amazing project managers at your companies. Go find one that you're like, I would love to model after them. They will have strengths and weaknesses, just like you have strengths and weaknesses. But find one that you're like, I think they're good because of this, and that's a skill that I need to develop. And that's how you're really going to learn, is just by observing. Maybe ask them to be your mentor, or let that person be the person that you ask to, watch some of the things that they do. I mean, honestly, those are probably the basic skills that are often not talked about enough, or we just think that we were going to learn it on the job, but why not learn it before? So
Yeah, and I think the two kind of top skills that you just said at the end there, just developing and making sure you're continually learning about some of these things, project management, construction, whatever position you want to achieve, and know what skills within that area you need to develop. And I think that the continual learning piece of it is super important, and we kind of often forget. I was of the mindset when I graduated, like, I'm done learning. Like, this is great. I went to school for 4 years and 2 years master's. Now I can just focus on actually getting the work done and not having to do homework, not having to like take notes. And like, man, how wrong was I? Because the learning doesn't really stop there. I think that's kind of when it actually starts, and it's becoming more fun and enjoyable because I'm doing it for some of the things that I want to do, some of the things that I'm more curious about. And this month I could be learning about how to design a new structure, or next month I could be learning more about how to become a better communicator. And it just kind of depends on the interest. Having that continual learning, I think is super important. And then the second piece there would just kind of embrace the flexibility of starting on, you may be a little more rigid in terms of like, I want to create a solid base of engineering knowledge and technical stuff. But as you progress, just be more flexible, and you may have an idea of what you want to be doing. But as you start talking with people and kind of developing this lifelong learning, you start realizing maybe this area is not for me, and I need to focus on this other area. And I think just having that flexibility and that humility, like you said, just speaks a lot for your career and what are you going to be doing.
I just love what you just said, just being a lifelong learner. I just think that was a great way to summarize it. So hopefully our listeners are going to commit to that and say, I'm just going to continue learning the rest of my life, and hopefully they commit to learn something new every day. And I mean, honestly, that's the most fun I have in my job, is when it's something is newly discovered on a daily basis. And it's fun. Yeah. And then I just think you summarized it well.
If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, you're going to love the content we have over our newsletter. Every issue comes packed with information about the episode that we recorded, giving you detailed action items, as well as just reflection on some of the things that you could apply in your career, in your life. And I always enjoy sitting down on a Sunday, Saturday sometimes, and writing down each newsletter. Comes packed with a lot of information, a lot of links, a lot of great lessons and knowledge that we share both in the podcast, but I'll try to go a little deeper into that connection. So if you are interested in that at all, go to luisfelipeduque.com/newsletter. All the information is there. I'm excited for the podcast and where it's going. So I want you to know about that resource as well. Nicolai and I put a lot of effort in the podcast, and we're enjoying the conversations. And as well, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, go to the link in the description below, or luisfelipeduque.com/contact, and let's connect. We're happy to provide you with all the information you need, and always excited to have that conversation as well. Thank you, Jack Winters, for the music, and as always, let's continue engineering our future.